People think betrayal comes crashing in like a storm. Shouting matches, slammed doors, a sudden shift you can't miss. They're wrong. It comes like a draft in a sealed room, so faint you question whether it's even there, until one day, you're standing in the cold and wondering when the warmth left. Eleanor and I weren't passionate in the way movies define it. Ours was a steady, lived-in bond, the kind that knows the difference between silence and distance. We had our rituals, morning coffee in the sunroom, crossword puzzles on Sundays, shared looks when dinner guests overstayed their welcome. I used to think that kind of quiet love was unshakable. But lately, things feel out of sync. Not wrong exactly, just off. A delay in her smile. A softness missing in her voice when she says goodnight. Like a musician playing the right notes with no music behind them. I didn't jump to conclusions. I don't do that. I'm not wired that way. I work with numbers. Not just numbers, truth. I'm a forensic accountant. People bring me the polished version of their lives, and I break it apart to see what's real. I notice what doesn't belong. Patterns, timelines, gaps. I can trace a shell company to an offshore account by spotting a single inconsistency in a quarterly report. I don't guess, I verify. But when it comes to people, especially the one person you've let closest to your life, it's harder to trust your instincts. The first crack came on a Sunday afternoon. She was curled up on the couch, legs tucked under a blanket, reading something on her Kindle. I walked in with a load of laundry and saw her phone screen light up beside her. Just a glance, not even intentional, but enough to catch a calendar notification. Time slot confirmed. 3 to 4:30 p.m. Wellness massage at Sienna Loft. I paused. Sienna Loft? I knew that place. Not from our neighborhood. It was a co-working space downtown, clean, modern, full of glass walls and high ceilings. I had helped their management during a fraud audit last year. There were no massage services, no spa, just shared offices and rented meeting rooms. I said nothing, just kept walking to the laundry room, folded towels slower than usual, my mind already pulling threads. Maybe it was a mistake, a mislabeled event, a pop-up ad she clicked by accident. But it didn't feel accidental. Eleanor had never needed coded language before. The next day at work, I pulled up the building's floor plan. Still no spa. Still no massage therapist listed anywhere. I checked the tenants. Nothing wellness-related. My hands moved automatically like they do when I'm knee-deep in tracing embezzlement schemes. But this wasn't business. This was personal. I didn't confront her. That's not who I am. I watched. I listened. I started noticing other things, not late nights or guarded texts, but precision, the kind that only appears when someone is hiding something. Eleanor was too careful. She never left her phone behind anymore, but not in a defensive way. She just always seemed to have it, like it was an extension of her hand. Her stories matched perfectly, too perfectly. She began wearing a different perfume, one she said she got as a free sample. She wore it on Tuesdays. Only Tuesdays. That alone wouldn't mean anything. But patterns rarely do until they repeat. I began to track things in my head, the way I do with spreadsheets. Time blocks, movement, statements, small inconsistencies others would miss. Then came the second break in the pattern. Friday afternoon. I was leaving a client meeting early, decided to drive the long way home through old parts of the city, where the streets still buckle from tree roots and time moves slower. As I turned the corner near Sienna Loft, I saw her car. It was parked near the side entrance, not in the visitor lot. I slowed. I didn't stop. Through the windshield, I saw her. She was leaning forward, smiling at someone in the passenger seat. Laughing even, not the polite chuckle she gives at dinner parties. This was deeper, brighter. I hadn't seen her laugh like that in I don't know how long. I didn't recognize the man. Mid-40s, trim beard, dark blue shirt. He said something. I couldn't hear it, obviously, and she touched his arm. I drove on. By the time I got home, I already knew what she would say if I asked. Something casual, a networking meeting, a friend from college, a last-minute work catch-up. She was too good at the surface story, but the hole beneath it was widening. That night, we had dinner like always. Roasted chicken, asparagus, candle burning low between us. She told me about a podcast she discovered, something about digital mindfulness. I nodded at the right moments, smiled where I was supposed to, but I wasn't there. I watched her hands as she cut her food. Precise, steady. The same hands that used to fidget when she was nervous. Not tonight. Her voice had the right tone, her sentences the right rhythm. She was playing a part, and she was playing it well. And I was done pretending not to notice. The next morning, I met with David, old colleague, closer friend. We'd built our careers side by side, working cases where people thought they could hide the truth under layers of spreadsheets and structured debt. We sat at the corner table in the diner where we used to unwind after audits. I stir my coffee twice before speaking. Did you ever look at someone you love, I said slowly, and realize they'd rehearsed everything they were going to say to you? David studied me, didn't blink. Tell me what you saw. I told him about the calendar notification, about Sienna Loft, about the parked car and the laughter. I didn't embellish. I didn't need to. He exhaled, long and low. That's not a careless lie, Arthur. That's a calculated one. I keep telling myself maybe I'm overthinking it. He shook his head. If anything, you're probably underestimating it. But I know you. You won't move until you're sure. He was right. I've built a life, a career, on chasing the numbers until they lead me to the truth. I just never thought I'd have to follow that trail in my own home. But the signs were there. The rhythm was broken, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. But I was ready to see, really see, and I would, even if I didn't like what I found. I didn't want to be right. God knows I wanted to be wrong. To be the overcautious man, letting his profession spill into his marriage. I would have welcomed the sting of embarrassment for jumping to conclusions, for seeing ghosts in shadows. But once you train your eyes to catch irregularities, it's hard to unsee them. They glow, even in the dark. I didn't set out to investigate her. Not at first. I still held out hope that the wellness massage at Sienna Loft was a misstep, some strange inside joke I wasn't part of. But even hope has a shelf life, and mine was quietly expiring. The night it all cracked open, it had started to rain. A soft, persistent drizzle. Nothing dramatic, but enough to turn the windshield into a slow metronome of wiper blades and blurred headlights. Eleanor had said she was going to a late networking seminar, one of those professional development mixers she occasionally signed up for. She even showed me the email invite, briefly, on her phone, but she never printed things like that. She always used her tablet, highlighted notes, color-coded events. I pretended not to notice the difference, but I tucked it away. That evening, something in me shifted. I didn't plan it, I just drove. Out of our neighborhood, past the coffee shop where we used to stop on Sundays, through the winding streets, toward the edge of downtown. I kept my distance. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for, just that I had to see for myself. At 7:04 p.m., I saw her car, parked 2 blocks away from where the seminar was supposedly held, tucked into a side street behind an upscale restaurant I hadn't been to in years. I pulled over further down, killed the engine, and waited. The rain tapped gently on the roof, and the dashboard clock glowed quietly in the dim. My breath fogged the glass as I sat in silence, watching. She appeared just after 7:30, umbrella in one hand, coat loose around her shoulders, walking briskly. Not toward the conference building, but across the street into the back entrance of the restaurant. A man was already waiting. I didn't recognize him at first, not until the light above the door flickered as he turned slightly to greet her. It was Mark Jennings. My breath caught. The blood in my ears drowned out the sound of the rain. I stared, unblinking. Mark, polished, well-liked family man, a longtime client of our firm. I'd worked on his accounts for 6 years, helped him navigate audits, advised him on retirement strategy, even met his wife at a fundraiser once. We'd spoken over whiskeys about ethics and legacy. Now he was holding the door for mine. They didn't touch, not then. No kiss, no obvious sign. But there was something in the lean of their bodies. The familiarity, the ease. She laughed at something he said, head tilted, just like she used to tilt it with me when I'd say something she didn't expect. That laugh was mine. Used to be, anyway. They disappeared inside. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. The pit in my stomach, the taste of metal in my mouth. It told me everything. I drove home. I don't remember the ride. Just the sound of the blinker ticking at every turn and the occasional swipe of the wipers slicing through the blur. When I got home, I sat in the garage for almost 20 minutes. Lights off. Engine quiet. The rain had softened to a mist, coating the windshield in a dull sheen. I should have gone inside. I should have done something. Instead, I went to our office. The one Eleanor and I shared at home. The room we used when we were building the foundation of our financial consulting project years ago, before her career took a different turn. It hadn't been touched in weeks. Her side still had the old leather-bound planner we used to joke about, the dream ledger, she called it, where we scribbled down ideas about legacy, shared goals, future plans. I opened it, dusty, a little stiff. Between the pages, like something left for someone else, I found a photo. Folded once, not recent. Printed on glossy paper, but not professionally. It was of them, Eleanor and Mark, laughing, arms around each other in a candid moment outside what looked like a cabin porch. The timestamp on the back read 5 months ago. It wasn't just the image that gutted me. It was what was written in her handwriting, just beneath the fold. Feels like our real life finally started. My knees buckled. I didn't cry right away. At first, I just stood there still like my body hadn't caught up to the blow. Then I sat on the floor, the photo trembling in my hand, and the tears came silently. Not from rage. Not yet. Just grief. Raw and quiet. My mouth opened, but no words came out. Everything we had, every laugh, every quiet morning, was suddenly blurred by that single sentence. Real life. As if ours had been an illusion. I don't know how long I sat there. The sound of the rain returned, faint through the window. I thought of the nights we used to talk about starting our own practice. How we joked that one day we'd work side by side. A husband and wife team built on trust and skill. That planner held those dreams. And now it held the proof of what she'd replaced them with. Eventually, I stood, wiped my face, took a photo of the note and the picture with my phone, slipped the photo back where I found it, closed the book. I didn't confront her when she came home later that night. She moved through the house like nothing had changed. Said she was tired. Said the seminar was dense. I nodded, told her to get some rest. I barely heard her footsteps going up the stairs. The air in the house felt heavy, like it knew, and I knew too. It's true. She's having an affair with a man I trusted, in the shadow of the life we built. I stood in the middle of that room for a long time, eyes closed, heart loud, and I made myself a quiet promise. I would not scream. I would not rage. I would face this with the same precision I bring to every truth I uncover. I would not look away. The house was still, the kind of stillness that creeps under your skin, not because it's quiet, but because something is coming. I sat in the living room, in the dark. The grandfather clock marked every second like a hammer on glass. Her keys jingled outside. The lock turned, and then the door opened. She stepped in, shaking off the late autumn wind, her bag still over her shoulder. She paused when she saw me. "You're up," she said, trying for casual. "Everything okay?" "I think we should talk," I replied, my voice flat. She hesitated. "Can it wait?" "No," I said. "It can't." I gestured to the coffee table. The photo, the planner, the evidence, arranged as precisely as any audit I'd ever conducted. She didn't move at first, but when she did, her breath caught. Her eyes flicked to the photo, then to me. "I found it," I said, "in our office, the one we built together, along with our trust." Her eyes didn't leave the table. "Mark Jennings," I added. "Client, colleague. You lied to me. For months." Still, no reply. "I saw you with him last week. You said you were at a seminar. Instead, you were with him." Smiling, laughing. She closed her eyes. "I didn't want to believe it," I continued. "But then I found the photo, and the line you wrote. Feels like our real life finally started. You weren't just having an affair. You were living another life. One where I didn't exist." Her face tightened. "It's not what you think." "Don't," I cut in. "Don't insult me by denying what's in that picture, or what's been in your eyes these past few months." Her voice cracked. "You're so clinical, so cold. This is what it's always been like. You bury yourself in numbers. You never fight. You just observe." I stood, not angrily, but with weight. "I fought for us, in every quiet way a man can. You just never noticed." That's when it happened, when she snapped. "Because you're weak, Arthur," she shouted suddenly, years of silence erupting. You're not a man who takes charge. You're careful, measured, but never present. I needed more. Someone real. Someone stronger. The words echoed, and I stood in them. All the moments. All the years. The quiet dinners. The Sunday puzzles. The shared dreams. She reduced it all to this. Stronger. I said, my throat dry. You mean louder. More reckless. Someone who breaks things and calls it passion. She stepped back. That's not what I meant. No, I said. It's exactly what you meant. You just didn't expect me to hear it. Right then, her phone buzzed. The name glowed on the screen. Mark Jennings. We both saw it. She lunged, but I picked it up first. I think he's calling to check the damage, I said. Then I ended the call. She stared at me, tears now forming in her eyes, but they did nothing for me. I didn't want to hurt you, she whispered. You just didn't care enough not to. I was lost. You found someone else's arms instead of looking in mine. She collapsed into the armchair, face in her hands. I stood there, the photo back in my fingers. You broke our vow, I said, but not my worth. She sobbed harder now, but I couldn't move toward her. My feet stayed planted. My heart didn't ache to comfort her. Not anymore. I took a deep breath. I'm not going to tell his wife, I added, because I don't know if doing it would be justice or just my way of bleeding on someone innocent. She didn't respond, just cried harder. I turned and started toward the door. Where are you going? She asked, voice broken. Away, I said. I don't know where yet, but not here. She rose. Please don't leave like this. I stopped at the threshold, back still to her. You wanted to live differently, I said. Now you will. Then I walked into the night. The door closed softly behind me. The silence followed me down the porch, through the yard, into the car. But this time it didn't hurt. It was the sound of something ending, and something else beginning. I slept on the couch for 3 nights. It wasn't about punishment. It was distance, space between what we were and what we had become. The nights were long, the ceiling too close, the shadows too honest. I'd lie there, half watching the glow from the street lamp cast lines across the living room wall, try to remember the last time we'd truly laughed together. Not the polite chuckles or tired smiles, but the kind of laugh that bends you forward, that binds you to a person. I couldn't recall. That felt like a betrayal all its own. Eleanor didn't leave, not right away. She kept to the guest room, moving through the house like a ghost, quiet, avoiding my eyes, her presence thick in the air. On the second morning, I woke to find a note on the kitchen table, written in her careful cursive. Please don't make any final decisions yet. Can we talk? I didn't respond. I wasn't being cruel. I was thinking. I spent those days in a fog of memories and questions. I walked our property, drank coffee in the backyard workshop I'd built with my own hands the year we bought this house. That place had always been mine. Every tool hung in perfect alignment, the oak bench sanded smooth from years of wear. It smelled like cedar, sawdust, and 1,000 quiet hours of peace. A sanctuary, a space where my mind could settle, even now. It was in that quiet that I remembered the promises we made, not just on our wedding day, but across decades. Late-night drives, talks over soup in January. We had vowed to build something lasting, a partnership, a legacy, and we had. But she'd torn the foundation out from under it when she let someone else into that sacred space. And the question I kept circling back to wasn't, can this be saved? It was, what would I have to become to stay? On the third day, I called David. We met at the walking trail near the reservoir, just 2 old friends on a bench, the autumn wind stirring the reeds along the edge. I told him everything. The photo, the planner, the confrontation, her plea. He listened, as he always had, without interruption. When I finally went quiet, he nodded slowly and said, Arthur, it's not just about what happened. It's about what you can live with. Fixing this or moving on. Both will cost you something. Only one lets you sleep at night. That was it. The simplest truth. I couldn't live with it. That night, Eleanor tried again. We stood in the kitchen, the same place where we used to dance on quiet Friday nights when the world was kind and small. She looked tired, hollow-eyed. Her voice was quiet. I made a terrible mistake, she said, but it didn't come from nowhere. We grew apart. I needed something, and I found it in the wrong place. But I still love you. Can't we try? I wanted to believe her. I truly did. But I knew what love was. And love didn't come wrapped in secrecy and someone else's cologne. Love didn't hand out false receipts and call it growth. I don't question that you were unhappy, I said. But you could have told me. You could have spoken. Instead, you stepped outside us. And once you did that, you ended what we had. She took a step forward. But it's not too late. It is, I said, calm but final. It became too late the moment you put our life in someone else's hands. Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't reach for her. That instinct was gone. I've been talking to a lawyer, I added, and her breath caught. I'm filing. The words came out steady, and they felt like air after drowning. That's when the external fight began. We co-owned the workshop property, technically an extension of our shared estate. And when the divorce details surfaced, her tone changed. Her lawyer requested it be sold and divided. To her, it was a number on a line. To me, it was everything I had left that was untouched by the affair. I didn't yell. I did what I do best. I went through our financials, every shared expense, every documented agreement. I compiled the contracts, the emails, the plans I'd drawn by hand for that building. She contributed nothing. No labor, no funds, no time. I presented it with quiet precision. And in the end, her lawyer backed down. The workshop remained mine, not out of sentiment, out of truth. It was my stand, not for revenge, but for what was just, for the only part of me she hadn't stained. A few days later, we had our final conversation. We met in the office, the one where I'd found the photo. She sat on the other side of the desk. She looked older somehow, smaller. I never meant to lose you, she whispered. I looked at her for a long moment. You didn't lose me. You gave me away. She didn't respond. Maybe there was nothing left to say. As she stood to leave, her hand brushed against the edge of the desk, just lightly, like muscle memory. She paused. I removed my wedding ring and placed it in the drawer. That small sound, the soft clink of metal on wood, felt louder than anything either of us had said. She turned and walked out. I watched her go, the weight of the moment pressing in. And yet, under it, a sense of clarity began to take root, like a man who finally sees the shoreline after drifting too long. I had chosen, not out of bitterness, not out of pride, but because a life built on dishonesty, no matter how familiar, is not a life worth preserving. The hurt remained. It would for some time, but my integrity, that was intact, and that had to be enough. The silence was different now. Before, it was heavy, charged with things unsaid, footsteps not taken, words I swallowed instead of speaking. But after she left, it was just quiet, honest in a way, no longer hiding anything. Just the bare bones of a house and a man inside it, figuring out what came next. I signed the divorce papers on a Tuesday. No ceremony, no last-minute speeches. Just ink on paper and a quiet nod across the table. She wore a gray coat I didn't recognize. Her hands shook slightly as she slid her copy toward the lawyer. Mine didn't. I drove home afterward and sat in the car a while. Not because I didn't want to go inside, but because I wasn't sure what I'd find when I did. The house still smelled faintly like her perfume, citrus and vanilla. Familiar, now painful. Dividing belongings wasn't about objects. It was about memories. The tea kettle she loved went into the box. So did the old picnic blanket we'd used maybe twice. Photos came down from the hallway wall. I boxed up the framed ones, left the empty hooks. The house felt bigger without her things. Or maybe it just felt emptier. I couldn't tell. The first few weeks were rougher than I admitted to anyone. Cooking for one, sitting at the dining table and instinctively reaching for a second plate. Opening drawers and finding her handwriting on old receipts. I'd stand in the garage sometimes, hand on the old toolbox, not moving, just breathing through it. Grief doesn't always look like crying. Sometimes it looks like a man standing in his own kitchen, staring at the sink, trying to remember how long it's been since he heard another voice. But I didn't drown in it. Instead, I turned back to something I hadn't touched in years. My father's '67 Mustang. Rusted to hell, missing half its guts, but still sitting in the back of the workshop like it was waiting for me. I rolled up my sleeves and got to work. It was slow at first. My hands remembered more than I expected, how the carburetor fit, how the chassis flexed when I leaned in just right. I'd spend hours under the hood, the the radio low in the background, the scent of oil and old steel thick in the air. It wasn't just the car I was rebuilding, it was me. One Saturday morning, a knock came at the workshop door. I wiped my hands and opened it to see Mark Jennings standing there. He looked older somehow, worn, like he hadn't slept in a while. He didn't say anything at first, just looked past me into the garage, then back at my face. "I didn't expect you'd want to see me," he said. "I don't," I replied, and started to shut the door. He stopped it with his hand. "I came to say I'm sorry." I stared at him, not in anger, just with the clarity that comes when you've already walked through fire. "You came here for you," I said, "to ease your conscience. But I live with what you helped break. Every day. I never meant." "You meant exactly what you did," I said. "You took my trust, but not my strength. Now get off my property." He left, quietly, without a word more. And I stood there, heart pounding, not with rage, but with something close to pride. I hadn't shouted. I hadn't broken down. I had stood my ground on soil I'd earned. In the weeks that followed, I found myself again. David and I started grabbing lunch once a week. Real conversations, not just work talk. I reconnected with my niece, taught her how to change a tire. I picked up books I'd always meant to read. I even caught myself laughing, really laughing, at something so dumb on TV, I had to pause it to breathe. There were setbacks, too. A song on the radio that hit too close. A dream where she walked back and like nothing happened. I'd wake up disoriented, haunted for a few hours. But each time, I came back quicker, stronger. One evening, I finished the Mustang's ignition. The engine roared to life like it had just been waiting for permission. The sound filled the workshop, reverberated in my chest like thunder. I stood there, hands greasy, eyes burning, smiling through it. That car, battered, neglected, almost forgotten, was alive again. And so was I. The new place I found wasn't big. Just a modest 2-bedroom on the edge of town with wide windows and a small yard. But it had sunlight in the morning that spilled across the hardwood floors like gold. The first morning there, I made coffee and stood barefoot by the window, watching the lights stretch long shadows toward me. I felt peace. Not joy. Not yet. But peace. And one day, I realized I hadn't thought of her in hours. Then a full day. Then 2. I didn't mark the moment, didn't celebrate it. I just noticed. Like the first warm day after winter, you don't need to announce it. You just step outside and breathe. Not long after, I heard her name again. David mentioned something offhand. He'd heard from a colleague that Eleanor had stepped away from a major project at work. Something about burnout. There was a pause in his voice, like he wasn't sure if he should tell me more. But I didn't ask. Her story was no longer mine to follow. 3 years had passed. Enough time for dust to settle, for silence to become peace. Enough time to no longer flinch at her name or dream of a different ending. I had rebuilt my life without ceremony, quietly, one decision at a time. The workshop had become more than a place. It was therapy, discipline, independence. I took on restoration projects, mentored a few apprentices, even got the Mustang running like a dream. She'd been left in pieces in the corner for years, much like me. Now, both of us were back on the road. I hadn't thought of Eleanor in months. Until that afternoon. I had just picked up some finish for a walnut clock case I was working on and stopped by the bookstore across the street. As I stepped out, coffee in hand, I saw her. Eleanor. She stood outside a pharmacy, holding a small bag, staring down at something on her phone. Her coat looked thin for the weather. Her shoulders hunched. I watched her for a moment before she looked up and saw me. Her reaction was subtle. A blink, a slight straightening of her posture. Then she crossed the street. "Arthur," she said with a hesitant smile. "Eleanor." Her voice was softer. She looked smaller somehow, more fragile. We spoke briefly. I told her I was still working with my hands. The Mustang was finished. I'd started restoring old clocks. Simpler systems. No betrayal in the gears. She nodded as though trying to process the shape of the life I now lived. Then she said it. "I'm sorry. For what I did. For how I ended things." I looked at her. Said nothing. "He left, you know," she added. "Mark, just a few months after everything. So it was too complicated. That I came with baggage." Her voice cracked a little. "The business failed. Clients pulled away. Too much noise. I sold the house. I rent now. Smaller place. It's not what I thought it would be. She laughed once, but it was hollow. I guess I lost everything. There was no pride in her anymore. Just residue. I didn't gloat. I didn't soften. After a pause, I spoke. You wanted a different life. Now you have it. Look at your new reality. Without me. Without us. Without respect. She froze. Not because it was cruel, but because it was true. I didn't yell. I didn't curse. I just gave her what she had earned, clarity. I stepped away. She stayed standing, watching, unmoving. I walked across the lot to my Mustang. The sun warmed the hood, glinting off the polished chrome. I opened the door. Before I got in, I looked back. She hadn't moved. And on her face, I saw everything. Regret, recognition, a grief too late to matter. I got in, closed the door. The engine growled to life beneath me. And I drove off. Not to escape. Not to prove a point. Just forward. That night, I stood in the doorway of the workshop. The Mustang rested under the soft lights, and beside her, my latest project waited, an antique regulator clock from 1903. Its gears were delicate, predictable, honest, like I had become. There was peace here, not because nothing hurt anymore, but because what hurt no longer held me hostage. Eleanor had made her choice, and I had made mine. The past broke me, but I rebuilt stronger, and that made all the difference.